fact that my parents were like, you can do this. You know, we support you in whatever decisions you make. So they loaded up their van. I remember it like yesterday. We drove down to Irvine. They stayed in the parking lot in Irvine in Mesa Court because the van had the couches back in the day that you can let down. They spent the night, dropped me off. I went into Sierra. They stayed all day. Everybody else's parents left. Well, except for one other friend that I ended up connecting with. And they stayed to make sure I had everything. And I remember my dad was like, where's the rest of your clothes? And my mom says, that's it. They all share clothes. Starry can't bring all the clothes here to Irvine. I had like 3 pairs of jeans, maybe 4 shirts. That was it. And I couldn't take everybody else's clothes because we shared them, but that was part of it. So they stayed the night. And, you know, in Sierra, they do this joke on everybody that, hey, you said, you get up early in the morning. And I had my hair in rollers back then had my fresh pajamas that my mom had brought us. And Joey Caldwell, who still works in housing, was my RA. And they banged on the door and said, hey, it's a gas leak. We got to get out. Like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. We all jump out of our bed. We stand outside of Sierra. We're, you know, kind of cold. And they're like, well, they called, they're not going to come probably for another hour. We may as well go over to Mesa Court and eat, just go eat to the Commons, Mesa Commons. So we go, okay. So everybody's walking over in our pajamas and rollers. And all of a sudden, you know, we're eating. And then Joey stands up and goes, welcome to Sierra. This was our first, you know, prank on you guys. There's no gas leak. We just wanted us to have our first breakfast together. So we're all laughing like, really? We go to leave. Now, everybody else's parents are gone. We go to leave. I see my mom, like, hi, Mom. She's at the phone booth, because back then there was no cell phones. She's at the phone booth checking on my sisters. And she's like, Darlene, we can't leave you for any time. And you come out of the house in your pajamas and rollers. What is wrong with you? Have you lost your mind? That's not how you were trained. And she's lecturing me. I'm going to tell your daddy's in the van. I'm like, oh my God. All the friends are like, that's your parents. So that was an experience. They finally left that day. And I, you know, they're crying and boo-hooing, and I'm waving like, bye, see ya. So I've had
story. I'm really impressed that they stayed in the parking lot for you all night long and were there to witness the prank.
Yes, they witnessed it
in their own way. I mean,
right.
How did you actually choose UCI above it, you know, other options that you may have had? Did you visit beforehand, or was it something special about the university that really piqued your interest?
So I only applied to 3 universities, Stanford, UC Irvine, and San Jose State. I really was just trying to make my parents happy with San Jose State, because I was like, that's too close. They're going to be trying to drop in on me, make me come home on the weekends. And then I thought Stanford is close too, but they're kind of isolated. So that would be a little different. And they had a bowling alley. That's the only reason I really wanted to go, because we bowled. You know, back in the day, Black folk could bowl, and it was very inexpensive. And they got their own bowling alley. UC Irvine, under I think Manuel Gomez was the vice chancellor, I believe, or he may have been over admissions. But Cheryl Dearman worked for UC Irvine. They came to my high school, Fremont High School in Oakland, and ask about peer counseling, who would be interested in doing peer counseling. And because I was volunteering with special ed, I was like, okay, the counselor did call on me. She knew I wanted to go to college. And they said, we have a peer counseling program. We'd like to fly you down for the weekend, all expenses paid, pay for your food and everything, for you to stay, accommodations. And once I hit Irvine's campus, I thought, this is it. This is beautiful. And back then, they did not have all these buildings. You know, Bob's Big Boy was the entertainment. But if you kept walking, you would end up in the same place. And I thought that was so cool. And the campus was green. It was beautiful. I felt welcome. I saw people that looked like me, not a lot, but enough. And they offered more money. So I said, this is where I'm going. And it will take my parents at least a plane ride, which my mom didn't fly then, or a 6-7 hour ride to get to me. That meant they would call to make sure I was home. So that's how I decided.
What year did you start UCI?
In 1981.
1981. And so that's when they had a program for students to come before they began for this peer counseling.
They called it peer counseling. Yes. And that's how they got a lot of us. And then I found out that two friends that I went to Frick Junior High School with, one went to Castlemont, one went to Skyline. So three of us went to three different high schools, but we stayed connected. The two of them came as well, but they did not go on the peer counseling. But I did go on that trip. And then when we found out that we were all going, we were elated. And then Linda who was from Castlemont, she and I actually ended up rooming together. And she had to go down to the summer bridge program. So she learned everything about the campus. So when I came, we were ready to roll because she already knew all the info.
What did you do during that summer or when you were visiting for peer counseling?
When we came down for the visit?
Yeah.
We met with people that told us about Irvine. I want to say we met with a lot of Black folk and definitely folk of color on the campus, and students that talked about their experience. They talked about counseling and how important it was. That's when I found out that they did not have a special education major. And I was like, wait, I wanted to be a special ed teacher. They don't have a special ed major. But first generation in college, you don't know that. You don't know that information. And somebody recommended, why don't you major in psychology? I thought, okay. They said you could still be a teacher with psychology and go on to teachers. I said, okay, that sounds great. So that's how I selected. I would major in psychology.
What were the other students like? You mentioned that you interacted with, the students for that summer experience, and then Sierra sounded like its own community.
Sierra was their own. And just to clarify, the peer counseling program was in my senior year of high school.
High school, okay.
Yes. And then the summer bridge program, that's what my roommate, Linda, that's what she went through, their summer bridge right before we start. But I didn't have to go through that summer bridge. I think at that point, if something was with your GPA or they felt you need stronger areas, I would have loved to have gone down there for 6 weeks because I didn't, at home, I'm just chilling.
Thank you for that clarification. To go back, what were your thoughts of the students that you had an opportunity to interact with during, your first year at UCI?
During that peer counseling or during my first year?
Both. I mean, I think there's always kind of like a first impression of the people you meet when you first join, visit a campus, and then you get to know more about your fellow peers. And so I'm interested in understanding both of your experiences.
So when I came down for the peer counseling experience, I witnessed that photo that you have behind you. That's what I saw. It was just absolutely beautiful. I mean, I'm from East Oakland on 50th Avenue. We don't have that, right? So I was already impressed with just the serenity of the campus and just how the aesthetics of it, just how beautiful it looked. But when I came down for the peer counseling, just to see people that looked like me, and I felt special, like they selected me, because I think only like 2 or 3 people from our school was able to go. And I thought, wow, they're flying me down, all expenses paid. I mean, they're expressing, we want you, right? So you want to go to a place. Yeah, I had gone to San Jose State. I looked at their campus. I looked at Stanford. I already love their campus, but they specifically want you. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, if I don't get into Stanford, Irvine is definitely my number 1 pick. Well, I didn't get into Stanford. And I was like, I should have gotten into Stanford. They're lost, but I used it as motivation. And then I had to check myself. You really only wanted to go because they had a bowling alley. And then I said, that makes it very clear. And I believe, I'm a woman of faith, and I believe nothing is by coincidence. And it was meant for me to come to UC Irvine, and they gave money. So why not?
What was the psychology? You mentioned you decided to major in psychology. So tell me a little bit about your departments and the professors that you interacted with. How did that go? What was your experience?
This is an easy question. First of all, I did not know that psychology was even attached to the School of Social Science until I got ready to graduate. My contact with psychology was Dr. Joseph White. I am a mentee, a proud mentee of the late Dr. White. He shaped me into who I am. He helped shape me. He was one of my main mentors. The first time I took his class, which was in my freshman year, no, I didn't take his class in freshman. I had heard about him, but at the end of the year, they used to have, and I think they have it, but in a different way, the Black graduation, and they wanted people to MC it. So I was selected, as well as my friend Michael Scott, who is now an educator in Oakland. We were selected to be the co-moderators. And we laughed and kept everybody going. So this would have been the end of our freshman year. In the audience was Dr. Joseph White. He came up to me afterwards and said, I want you to take my class next semester. I'm on sabbatical this year. I just came because they were giving him an award. But I want you to come and talk to me. He said, call my assistant, Edna. She'll arrange for me to meet with you in the fall. I thought, yeah, okay. All right, sure. I went ahead. Of course, my parents, when I went home that summer, were like, you need to be doing something. And I told them all about what happened. You need to be calling that professor and find out. So I called his assistant, Edna. She set us up. We went to, I think, somewhere on campus, had lunch. He literally took a napkin. This is not a napkin, but he took a napkin and he said, we're about to write your future up. What's your major? I said, psychology. Yeah, you need to be in my class. That's how Joe White talked. You need to be in my class. And I was like, okay. So he wrote out what classes I needed to take. He said, you're going to do this by your junior year. You're going to TA with me. And then you're going to fly around the country with me when I go to conferences as my mentee. And I was like, what? For real? Is this for real? I mean, I'm from Oakland. So I'm like, what do you want? Nothing. He believed in giving back to the community. He told me, you need to go see these people right here, and they will hook you up for things. It was like a network he had. It was amazing. He goes, when my students come back that are in the PhD programs, I'm going to have you meet with them. So Thomas Parham, who is now the president of Dominguez Hills, he was one of those students that I met with, and he wrote it down because that's what it was. When Dr. White helped you, you had to give back. So I call him Tommy. Don't tell him this, he'll see the video. And I was like, Tommy, roll my schedule down for me in terms of, okay, this is what's going to happen. And I mean, it was just set up wonderfully. He was just the amazing thing. Prior to me meeting Dr. White, though, I was in line back in the day when you had to get in line and register, and then you had to go and get your financial aid check. I'm in line. Lisa Cornish, who just retired a couple of years ago, she comes out to the foyer in that big main administration building. She goes, I need 3 students. Anybody looking to work? I raised my hand. Bev Moore raised her hand, and Sheila Edwards raised her hand. Sheila now is the president of University of Washington Tacoma campus. Beverly is a big-time mortgage corporate officer. And then myself with my own business. We all raised our hands. She said, I only really needed 2, but all 3 of you raised your hand. You guys come with me. We got in there. She set up our schedules, worked around. Okay, this is your finals week. You're going to be studying. So I worked in housing with Lisa Cornish until financial aid told me that I made too much money and my financial aid had to be reduced. But then she just gave me more hours.
Well, I mean, my heart is full. I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. White while I've been here at UCI, and also Lisa Cornish, and they're, amazing, and hearing stories about how they influenced and mentored students really is a testament, I think, to their commitment to, the community. But, Also when I meet the students there that they've worked with, the testament to the success, that they
Yeah,
had doing that, because everybody is just amazing for
that's right.
sure.
And I'd
Um,
be remiss if I didn't mention Fred Henderson.
mm,
We called him Uncle Fred. And he was there my first 2 or 3 years, but just amazing. I went to their home, he and his wife, Bonnie, and they cooked dinner for me because they knew I was out of town, whatever I needed. I even stayed in touch with them after I left. After he left Irvine. Paris was in the cross-cultural center. Who motivated me to get involved in Miss Black Orange County pageant and work with me day and night to dramatically recite Maya Angelou's poem, Still I Rise. It's just people like that. When Lori came, Lori White, Dr. White's daughter, she also was very helpful. Just tons of people that just gave their hearts. It wasn't a lot of Black faculty and staff, but the Black faculty and staff that were there, Sharon Cruz, they all reached out to make sure that we were successful. The Black students were successful at UC Irvine. And Jim Craig, he's not Black, but he was over Sierra. And he made sure that we felt comfortable. Sierra was a whole different experience. It was great because of the diversity, but the underrepresented students that we call now, with myself, Black and brown, especially the Black students, we would go into, the restrooms and, oh, can I touch your hair? And, we'd be pressing our hair. Does that hurt? So it was different. And I'm born and raised all around Black folks. So it was definitely different and an adjustment, but I learned a lot being in Sierra.
So much to unpack with your reflections. I'll start with the first question, I had about the classes that you took with Dr. White. You said you have to take my class. And so I want to know, which class did you take and what did you think of it?
I took African-American psychology, or it may have been called Black psychology then. I took Black psychology and I loved it. I found myself, because even being Black, I was like, I didn't know this. Oh, wow. I had no idea. I didn't know all that. And it was just amazing finding out and learning things. And the way he presented it, he presented it in a way that you weren't bored. You wanted, you couldn't wait till Wednesday. You could not wait until the following, and it was at night. It was an evening class. And then, like I said, the next couple of years I TA'd for him. But just the information, when his book came out, I went to Stanford. I didn't end up going to Stanford. I went with Dr. White to Stanford. And he had a presentation and I met students there and talked to them. I went to the, Association of Black Psychologists conference in New York. He had arranged for the funding so that we stayed at the Waldorf Astoria, and everywhere we went, I had my friends, because by then I had pledged Alpha Kappa Alpha. So I met my sorority sisters or Alpha brothers, and then Dr. White would be with his colleagues. And then everywhere we went in the main, we couldn't even walk around the room without Dr. White. Dr. White, can I talk to you, Dr. White? And he was like, this is my mentee. This is Darlene Griffin. Remember that name? All of that. So you're feeling great. And I'm feeling great about Irvine just in meeting Dr. White.
What would you say are some of the takeaways that you gained from, your not just taking his class, but the mentorship you received from him and others?
I think my parents had already instilled in us that you are somebody, you will be somebody. So I think that Dr. White and the others that I mentioned, they just helped reconfirm that even though we're going through these challenges, and when we get to that question, I'll answer it, you can overcome this. You can be different. You can be the one that beats the odds here in your family. You can be the one that breaks the cycle. And Dr. White exposed me to things off of my block that I probably would have never been exposed to.
Such as what?
Well, traveling. I didn't travel a lot. Well, I was in close up. We went to DC. But just traveling around the country with him, knowing the deep part of just, like, it's not just Black history, it's not just in February, that we're to be celebrated throughout. All the people that made the contributions. I especially love when he talked about, especially back in the day, where special education, Blacks are disproportionate, and even today are still disproportionately in the special ed classes, and learned about how he walked out of San Francisco State, I believe I know it was in the 60s, and saying, we're going to have a Black Studies program here or else. He led that with other colleagues, Willie Brown and others, and how he came up with the bitch test, the Black intelligence test. And so to this day, when I'm sitting around advocating for students and scholars, I'm asking questions about the test and how much do you really rely on this test? And I tell them, have you heard of the bitch test? And they're like, the bitch test? So I'm still using things from him and will always do so. It broke my heart when he passed in 2017. But I was able to go to his daughter's presidential inauguration at her university just a few months ago, and you could just feel his presence there. He took me in too. I was like another daughter to him.
That's amazing. It sounds like you took away a number of things, and you mentioned that you learned a lot while in Sierra as well. And so I wanted to take a little time to have you speak about that experience and what you learned in Sierra.
Yeah, thanks to Jim Craig, we learned a lot. I look forward, I want to say it was like every Thursday, and we got credit for this class that we took. It was inside Sierra in like the little kitchen area that everybody shared, sort of a lounge, I guess. We would bring our pillows, it was kicked back, and we'd learn a lot about different cultures. And the scary thing about it is that we were with students that decided that they wanted to live with other students of color. They wanted to live in this themed dorm, but they didn't even realize the covert racism that existed within themselves. Now, some of them, we could educate them and they were good to go. Others were like, you know what, I've told you 3 times, don't say that to me. And you don't get it. So now I consider you a racist. And so it was having those candid discussions. Joey would always go, Dari, they didn't mean it like that. No, yes, they did. Because I talked to them 3 times about it. And like I said, they want to touch your hair. What are you eating? All kinds of just different. When they had parties, you look forward to going to the parties. We got it down packed. It was about 6 of us. It was Michael Powell, who still holds the long jump or triple jump world record holder. Michael Scott, who is an educator, Sharon Marks, who is a retired FBI agent. And I don't know if I should say that because she probably doesn't want me to say that to people, but she is. And let's see, Mike, I said Michael Scott, Michael Powell, Brett, and I'm forgetting somebody. But those of us, we were tough. We knew we would go to the parties, it would be all white music, none of our music. But Michael Powell was a DJ. So we would just wait for a couple of hours and all the white folks would get drunk because they had kegs in their rooms. They go to their rooms, get drunk, pass out, having sex, doing whatever they do. That was our opportunity to have Mike go up to the turntable, put in his tape, and we would dance to our music. So we learned to navigate around it. We had a community. You could walk into Mesa Court and go, anybody know where Darlene lives? Oh yeah, she's right there in Sierra. That's how close we were. We weren't all in Mesa Court. Some of them were in middle, what was it? Middle something.
Middle Earth.
Middle Earth. Some of them were in Middle Earth, but it was the bomb to be in Mesa Court. And an extra bomb to be in Sierra. So Sierra was a learning opportunity, but it definitely also was challenging.
you mentioned not everybody of, not all of the students of color were in Sierra, but it sounds like there was a strong community. And so can you expand on, your experience with the Black community at UCI while you attended, and what you all did together?
Yeah, no, I certainly can. It was definitely a great experience. My freshman year, one of the students, a Black student, was eating lunch in the cafeteria, and a white guy came and threw milk all over her. And, we're up in arms like, oh, no. And Miss Oakland, oh, no, where's this going down? But the Divine Nine, the brothers from Kappa Alpha Psi, Alpha Phi Alpha, we didn't have Omegas, but we knew how to reach them. They all came out and they searched. I don't know what they did with that boy, but they did something with him. They knew that the Black brothers was coming after him because he touched one of our queens. And then we started having all these meetings, and they would put out documents that said, people who can help. Not one Black person in there that could help was in there, that underneath people who can help. So I remember going and saying, oh no, you're going to redo this because these offices have Black people in there. And Paris had helped us, and we had organized the Black Student Union, and everybody was coming in through there. We would hang out at the Cross Cultural Center. That was the hangout spot. And we were like, look at this manual. Look at this document. This is from UC Irvine. And ironically, fast forward, when I was asked to be the keynote speaker of the Black scholarship gathering that they had, I had just received a booklet similar from the School of Social Science, in which my major was in, that had come to School of Social Science, come to UC Irvine, not one Black person in it. So during my speech, I greeted everyone, said hello, motivated them. That's when the students were they were sitting, doing some sit-ins and stuff like that. And I told them, we got to start talking to one another. Then I asked for all of the alums. I said, I know many of us brought our checks to give tonight, but let me show you this booklet that I received from my School of Social Science with none of us in it. So this check, and I had a check in my hand, this check, I'm going to tear it up. And when you get it together at UC Irvine, where you are acknowledging Black folk, you give me a call. And I said, and all the alums, tear up your checks. And people came up to me like, this shouldn't be. All these eyes, you have a whole publication. The same thing happened 30-something years ago at that time. And it's still happening 40 years later.
Yeah. What year was that? Do you recall?
When I spoke.
When you spoke.
I want to say Thomas Parham was the vice chancellor at the time. So I think he's been gone for about 4 years. So maybe it was 8 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, I was just curious because you mentioned at the time the student body was doing a number of sit-ins, etc.
Yeah,
to express their concerns with the campus. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit to what the concerns were that you heard at that time, but even more in depth about the ones that you mentioned, during the time that you attended UCI, that there were some things that you took to, I want to know who you took your grievances to and what was done.
So I took the incident with the manual that said people who can help. I took that to Fred Henderson and said, look at this, something's not right with this. Then I think from there, I took it to Manuel Gomez, who then took it to the ombuds person. And I want to say his name was Ron, big, tall guy. And then it may have eventually reached Dr. Horace Mitchell, who probably then shared it with the president. Very well-respected man, Dr. Horace Mitchell, another one of my mentors. But anyway, they ended up reissuing the entire booklet. They rescinded it and they redid it. When I went to Irvine, the first 2 years, I think it was, Martin Luther King did not have a holiday then. Well, we celebrated. We were like, we're going to celebrate it whether you celebrate it or not, UC Irvine. And so we had made plans to, do community service or whatever it was. Our teachers, our professors would purposely have tests or quizzes on that day. So we couldn't miss class. We couldn't do anything until later on. But many of us just said that, well, I'm just going to just take the loss. And we would meet up at that park off campus. I can't remember the name of it now, but we would meet at that park and we would walk from that park all the way to the university chanting Martin Luther King Day, Martin Luther King Day, and just talking and giving quotes and stuff like that. And several times, countless times, the white students, the white community drove by and said, niggers, what are you doing here? Throwing stuff at us, everything. So much that the Black Divine members and Black males in general, they would get on the outside of us as we would march. We wouldn't let it stop us. And then it became a holiday. But yeah, we marched for that holiday.
So what was it sounds like the administration's response was to grant the holiday. Did they have other responses to?
Well, they granted the holiday because it became a national holiday. Okay, so they didn't have a choice, right? Mm-hmm. So they granted it that way. We would go to the ombudsperson. It's really hard, being that I was in administration for 22 years. I worked in higher ed for 22 years. The majority of those years I spent as an administrator. And when you're the only Black administrator, and you're trying to take on everything, you've got to really kind of pick your battles and find out, how do I use it? And then you're the person that they use to say, can you go talk to the Black students and tell them it's going to be okay? That works for Black students that don't know what's going on. But Black students like me from Oakland are like, no, we're not dealing with this. No, we're going to stop paying you then. And stuff like that. And I just have always, I don't know, being 4 of 6 kids and one of 36 grandchildren, you speak up or shut up, and my great grandmother always said, a closed mouth won't get fed. So, I've always been the one to speak up, and I didn't mind. Even today, I was just on a couple of nights ago on the Black Alumni call, where the students are having more racial incidents sounding just like what happened 40 years ago. And they wanted more Black faculty and staff. And I said, I get that, but we didn't have that many Black faculty and staff when we were there, but we came together as a group. They're very isolated. And now, 2 high administrators, Black administrators are on the line, as well as a middle level administrator. And it's like, shame on you. And they had excuses. And, I was able to talk, and I said, stop with the excuses. This is the same thing that happened 40 years ago. So when you get it together, you call me. When you call me, I want to see the outcomes. Then I will provide my resources. But until then, no, these students are hurting. And it just shattered me, because it brought back memories from 40 years ago. We couldn't walk to our dorms at night if there was an issue. We were always escorted. The positive side is I became a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And that whole Divine Nine was just a whole different group that gave back to the community, that were leaders in Associated Students. We didn't even know that we could qualify for money from Associated Students. You didn't get that information. And we knew about everything because of that cross-cultural center, because of Paris, because of Lori.
I'm just reflecting on what you're saying, and thinking about how things have changed, but also remain the same.
Yes.
Um, so thank you so much for being willing to share about your experiences, you know, in the past and in the present.
Mm.
You've mentioned Alpha Kappa Alpha a couple of times, and I want to leave a little space for you to talk about, your decision to join the sorority, when you joined, and what to expand on how that affiliation really influenced your experience at UCI and beyond.
Absolutely, it influenced it. I was already used to having family and sisters. So, but when I joined Alpha Kappa Alpha in May of 1983, it was one of the best decisions that I could have ever made. I made lifelong sister friends. Even to this day, I'm still very active in AKA. I'm what they call a silver soror that's been in the sorority over 25 years. Actually, I think in 2 years, I'll be a 40-year member, but you're still considered a silver. My aunt is 88 years old. She's what they call a pearl member, been in the sorority for over 65 years. And when I tell you it has made a difference, not only on campuses like UC Irvine that are predominantly white institutions, I can go anywhere in this country. And when I see my sisters in pink and green, or they have something that says AKA, we start talking to one another, and it's as if we were friends from day one. When that trip I told you about New York, when we went to New York, I went to New York with Dr. White. One of our fun days with our Alpha brothers, we get on the subway and we meet a sorority sister. Her name was Marie. She lived in New York. She invited us. She said, I can tell you guys from California and you're from out of town because you're making noise and stuff like that. She's like, you need to be cool. Let me teach you the New York rules. We went over to her house. She told us all about New York. She showed us all around. She didn't know us from Adam, but she knew that I was a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha, and Michael and them were members of Alpha Phi Alpha. And once I pledged, or now they say membership intake process, but once I became a member of AKA, it changed my world. We would go to parties at the Alpha House, the Omega House in LA, drive all the way to Los Angeles from Orange County, from Irvine, to go to the party at the Alpha House. They knew us because we were with the Lambda Sigma chapter. We get right to the front of the line in the Kappa House. Come on, there's our Irvine. They're like, come on, spend the night. No, we're going back to our place. But we would go to all of their events, the Greek shows. We would literally get in our cars from Irvine, drive up to LA, pick up about another 10 cars. We would caravan up to San Jose, to the San Jose Greek show. They did the same thing coming to the San Diego Greek show. Just so much fun. Giving back to the community, helping other people. I cannot tell people enough to get involved with the Divine Nine. It doesn't have to be AKA. It can be Delta Sigma Theta. My husband was an Omega Psi Phi member. So it could be any of the Divine Nine, and what a difference it will make in your life.
Wow, that's fantastic. Such great experiences that you've had. We've covered so much so far in reflecting on your UCI experience. I wanted to see, if you haven't mentioned it already, what was your, fondest memory of UCI?
Fondest memory would be meeting my still friends to this day, Sharon and Sansia. Sansia was a year behind us, but back in the day, through the Black Student Union, you would adopt a student coming in as a freshman so that you showing them the ropes and everything. So Sansia, who is now a vice president at UT Austin, she was my little sister, and everybody in her family were AKAs, but so I knew she was going to pledge anyway. But we would, just hang out. I'd show her the ropes about Irvine. But I guess, so my fondest memory is meeting Sansia, Sharon, Michael Powell, Michael Scott, and Brett. And we were a force to be reckoned with. Sansia came in the following year, but we were a force to be reckoned with. And when they pledged first with Alpha, and then 3 months later, we pledged AKA. And so that was probably my fondest fun memory. Academic wise, was Joe White, hands down, changed my life. And then of course, the Alicia Cornishes and Uncle Freds of the world. And even though I had some negative experiences at Irvine, I still wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it because it beat staying at home. I don't know what would have happened to me had I stayed at home. I know my parents would have steered me correctly, but definitely would have been a different outcome. And the negative, I'm a person, because my mom and dad taught us how to we had high self-esteem. So I took the negative incidents and turned them into positive and said, I'm going to do something about it. I'm not sitting around allowing you to call me a nigga as you drive down the road and not even coward. You're a coward. You won't even come to my face and say it. It was time consuming, but I'm still that way. So I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it, but it does sadden me that it hasn't changed in 40 years. And I think that everybody has to come together, and we have to try to make a difference.
I have just a few more questions for you. I know I wanted to go back to this Miss Black Orange County pageant that you were in. Yeah. And you mentioned briefly, and I want to know, what was that? What was the experience that you've had in Orange County with participating in that, and just in general?
So I think how that happened, where was I? I forgot where I was, but sitting in the audience, I was probably speaking somewhere, and sitting in the audience was Darlene Hunter. She is the wife of Jerome Hunter, Dr. Jerome Hunter, who also moved up in higher education, and at one point was, I think, the chancellor over that entire community college system before he retired. But Darlene was, and her friend Zandra, they were into the arts, and they would do these, we were in, I can't even think of the name of it, but it was like Black theater. And so they would do ensembles, and I played Dorothy and the Wiz in one of their plays, and I was able to sing, and they did, song Old Man River. I mean, just an amazing Dream Girls. We were able to do the Dream Girls, and this was in Santa Ana that they had this. And so I started working with Darlene, and she took me under her wing, and she said, you have a gift. And I said, yeah, I mean, I knew I do have a gift of speaking, and I give all credit to God. We all have our gifts, and that's one of mine. And so Paris worked with me day and night. I mean, literally, Darlene, you coming here tonight. Cross Culture Center going to be closed. You're going to come here, and we going over that. And he would stop me, and I would, I would just start saying it, start saying the poem, and he would stop. Now go back and give it to me. You're just saying the words. I want you to say them dramatically. And so I entered into this pageant. Actually, that's where Darlene saw me. My memory comes in. I'm almost 60, so my memory's going crazy. And she was in the audience. Her husband was a judge. She saw me do Still I Rise and said, I want you to come and let me work with you. And I didn't win that pageant. I came runner up, but I found out, I guess I can say this because it's years later, that the person that they gave it to, they said the scores were all messed up. People were judging them differently, and that I was supposed to win, but the girl that won had been in the pageant like 4 times. and her mother was a big donor or something, who's this girl from Oakland coming in. And so that's how I found out. I started working with Darlene. And that's when we started doing all of these plays, and I started acting a little bit. I just couldn't support myself on acting. But yeah, I did that whole, I know it I just spoke at a Black History Month event, and I ended with Dr. Maya Angelou's poem. It's one of my favorites.
Oh,
so that's how I got into
that's
it.
so cool.
I would do monologues, and I loved it. That was like I would have loved to have gone into that. It's just, didn't feed me.
Well, I'm really happy that you had an opportunity to get involved when you did at UCI, and to engage with the community outside of the campus. I mean, how did you what was your sense of the community?
I felt the community, we were sparse, and I thought, now looking in hindsight, I thought, boy, if we would have had money to buy up the property in Irvine, because that property has, is off over the charts now. The Orange County community was different. A lot of rich white folks that expressed themselves, especially around Martin Luther King holiday. But what kept us together was the UC Irvine, the small Black faculty and staff, and the camaraderie and friendship and sisterhood, brotherhood of the Black students there. We knew it was 1% then. We knew it was not a lot of us, but we worked together. And so that is what I consider the community. When you went off the campus, it was totally different. I worked at one point, I think it was my junior year. I got on with the school district, and I was a teacher's assistant to a classroom of kindergartners. The teacher was a Latina woman, so she was Latina. And most of the children that were in the class spoke Spanish as their primary language. She refused for them to speak their language, literally would punish them. We're not talking Spanish here. You're going to talk English, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. But I loved working with those kids. Like, come on, you can do this. You can do it. And if they slipped up, she was right on them. One day, a little girl, she's kindergarten, so 4 or 5. She goes, well, I would walk the kids to the bus. And I guess her parent was picking her up. And she came back the next day, and she said, my mom said, I can't play with you. I said, what do you mean? She said, you're Black. I can't play with you. I thought, wow. Before then, she knew nothing. That proved Dr. White's point that he always said, that racism is learned. It's a learned behavior. That little girl knew nothing until her parents said, you don't want to play with it. And these are our Latino, our brown brothers and sisters. My mom said, I can't. What do you say to that? I quit after that.
Wow.
That's when I really knew, you don't want to be a teacher.
Oh, no. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
What a tough situation.
Yeah, but I think it helped me because I was an underdog, because my counselor said I wasn't college material. So now, even now, I like helping the underdogs. I have college-bound programs. My husband and I started up throughout California to empower the scholars. And 2 of the programs are predominantly Black, in empowering them, building their self-esteem, because that's half the battle. Somebody with low self-esteem is not going to do well at UC Irvine. You got to have a positive self-esteem. And so in our program, we teach them, I believe in myself. I love myself. I am the most important person in the world. I can think for myself, so no one will have to tell me what to think. Success is not going to come to me. I'll have to go and get it. I believe in treating people the way I want to be treated. Why, Dr. Willis? Because I know that I know that I know that I am college bound. We have to empower our young people to believe in themselves, to take lemon and turn it into lemonade. I know that's a cliche, but it is so true. And that despite, I mean, my husband, I talk about my husband, we were married for 34 years. And he was a Vietnam vet that was exposed to Agent Orange. And he lost his battle April 21st of last year, April 26th of last year, of 21. But he taught me so much being from Jackson, Mississippi. We think we had it bad in California, where they had to sit up in the crow's nest. They had to pay on the bus and get off and hope the driver waited for them to get on the back. All the stories they told, you know, and that's another thing with the veteran families and all of that good stuff, the knowledge that you don't have and to navigate that system. But it's because of self-esteem. If you don't have it, and that's what's happening, where our students are crying there at Irvine, they're not together like we were. And the self-esteem, because they don't feel the support. Everybody's working in silos. So I've always been, it's just a God-given thing, that going after the underdog, helping and supporting, going after those that are oppressing the underdog. And until it's changed, we have to change it. And it's tiring. I'm like Fannie Lou Hamer, girl. I'm tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah, right.
I understand that statement, right? Because it's just the constant battle for Black folks. It doesn't matter if you have a lot of money or not. When we would go to, what is it, South Coast Plaza, we were followed around in the stores. That is real. Even now, I mean, I'm not lacking in money. I'm not bragging. I'm not a billionaire, but I certainly have enough to hold my own and to donate, right? Thanks to my husband who was, you know, but anyway, even now, I'm pulled over in my Mercedes. I'm followed around in the stores, and I could either get depressed about it and get in bed and not come back out, or I can do something about it. And that's what we have to teach our young people. We have to teach them the history. Irvine needs to see this history and what the alums went through. Even though most of the alums that I know from Irvine that graduated are doing very well, right? But they have to see this. And the fact, I'm gonna say this, and you can feel free to edit it out if you want to, but the fact that the UC Irvine alumni decided that they were gonna do an oral history project at the same time, or they knew about the Black History Project. And to me, they misled us because they sent an email saying this oral history project, you know, would you like to be involved? I got the phone call, and something just told me, is this tied into, you know, Dr. Tribbett's history project? Is the same thing that the Black Alumni Association is doing? I don't know anything about this, just a worker. I don't know anything about that one, but if you just complete this, and I said, and what are you going to do with the information? Well, you know, I said, so this is like a who's who. You're going to sell it, and then I'm supposed to buy it because my name is in it? I said, no, thank you. And I do not appreciate them, to me, going around the Black Alumni Association and calling it the same name. So several people are confused, like, well, I already talked to them. No, this is a different project. This is the original project. That's why I'm so glad that we were able to connect.
I feel very fortunate to be able to speak with the Black alumni and to be a part of this project and to assist with its preservation. I think it's very long overdue. So, you know, I'm really grateful for your time. And as you mentioned, knowing and understanding and having the opportunity to be exposed to the history and the experiences of past alumni is something that can really help, I think, current students. And so, you know, I do hope that is one of the many, you know, outcomes of this project. We're coming up on our time, but I haven't spoken to you enough about what you've done after UCI.
So when I left UC Irvine, I stayed for about a year and a half acting, but I couldn't afford it. Right. So I'm like, I don't want to be working in no cafe, and no, I didn't really want to move home because I'm like, you don't move back home. So, but I ended up moving back home. My older sister convinced me, come on back home. They're hiring substitute teachers and you can teach. So I go back home, move back home, and there's a freeze on teaching jobs. Wow, go figure. So, and I have a BA in psychology. So I tell students now, anything ending in an ology, you need to go on to graduate school, period. That is the rule. So anyway, my uncle got me a job as a job developer. And, but prior to that, I worked for a company that they had a contract with the government. And I went in for my interview. My uncle called me, told me about it. I went in for the interview. Well, long story short, that was my husband that was interviewing me. And I always tell him, you were hitting on me. I knew I had the job. So I worked for him for about 6 weeks. And then I got a job as a job developer. So I quit the company. And then we started dating. And that was 35 years ago. Then we got married. And from there, we had 2 children that are now 31 and soon to be 34 on Saturday. And we lived in Oakland. I started working at Cal State Hayward, and they paid me to be an event manager. I brought Maya Angelou there. I mean, just had this budget to bring speakers and stuff. And I just worked my way up in administration. So I was in Cal State Hayward. I left there. I went back to school. I couldn't get any more money. So I negotiated with my boss. Okay, I know you can't pay me anything more, but will you pay for me to go to school? Give me time off. And she agreed. So I was going to night school, working full time, and my husband helped in taking care of the boys. They were little. And I went to California School of Professional Psychology, and I earned my master's first, and then my PhD in organizational psychology. And then from there, I just soared in higher ed. I thought I wanted to be a college president, but when God has a plan for you, so that was not the plan. And so what I did was, I ended up leaving. I was the dean of students at San Diego State, was my last position in higher ed. And my husband and I started College Bound. Well, the nonprofit name is Concerned Parents Alliance, and College Bound Academy programs. And we started that because we were raising 2 Black sons in Poway Unified School District that was an environment just like Irvine. And we brought together parents. And from there, I just started working full time with the nonprofit. My husband stopped after our kids graduated, but I now do it. And I retired from the system, but I worked with our College Bound Academy programs. And also when I went to UC San Diego, so I went Hayward to San Marcos to UC San Diego to San Diego State. When I was at UC San Diego, I convinced my boss to pay for me to go to Harvard's management and leadership program. So I had my PhD and then postgraduate at Harvard. And I wrote some books, and now I retired from one system, and I'll probably retire eventually, but it's a family-oriented nonprofit. And we just make a difference in changing lives, empowering students of color, but in particular, Black scholars and their parents/families, how to navigate the educational system and have the choice of attending college. So that's what we do.
I mean, well done. So
you.
what an amazing career you have and vision for the present and the future. And thank you so much for sharing it. We've covered a lot of topics today, but I want to just check in and see if there's anything that we didn't cover that you'd hoped we could save some space for, and then just kind of open that up to you. So is there anything that you'd wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
I think we covered most of it. I mean, and just saying, listen, people need to listen, that white folks, things are done differently. And that if we just would all listen, one of my favorite scriptures is James 1:19 that says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And then just have those exchange of dialogues, kind of duplicating what Jim Craig wanted for Sierra, where we could have an exchange of dialogue and sometimes keep talking until we just talked out. I may not believe in what you're saying, but I hear you. And now I know I've learned my lesson and I can talk through it. Right. And so being open and then just having a high self-esteem. I mean, you know, I love poetry, as you probably can tell, but at the end of Maya Angelou's piece, it says, out of the hut of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past, a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. You see, I am a Black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling. Come on, UC Irvine, we can bear in that tide. And that's because we're leaving behind nights of terror and fear. But we're into a daybreak that's wondrously clear. You see, I am bearing the gifts. You are bringing the gifts that our ancestors gave. I, you, we are the hope and the dream of the enslaved. So you see, I, Dr. Darlene V. Griffin Willis, who was told by my high school counselor that I was not college material, am going to rise. You're going to rise like Harriet Tubman. You're going to rise like Barack Obama. You're going to rise like Oprah Winfrey. You're going to rise like Joseph White. In fact, all of God's children. If we keep holding people accountable, we remember our history and where we've come from, we will rise together. And I guess that's how I would end it. Sorry, Dr. Griffin.
So powerful, so powerful. And yes, you have a talent.
Thank you.
Oh my word. Oh my goodness. Last thing, three words that you would use to describe your UCI experience.
Interesting. Motivational in its own way. And I don't know how to put it in a word, but because it's UC Irvine, but I gained another family. I gained another family through UC Irvine. They were the vessel, not because of them, but how it all lined up. And we just, we have to keep going. My husband taught me, once a task has begun, never leave it till it's done. Be the labor great or small. Like with Dr. Trippett, what you're doing is great, whether it be small. UC Irvine must learn to do it well or not at all. And that's what we have to do. And it's people like you, the reason that we're, without this, and hopefully this will blow up, this will soar and be used as an example. That is one of the things I forgot to mention. I'm still learning. Anyone that says that they're not learning, they're lying or they're walking dead. Everybody should learn something every single day, right? Even though I've earned that PhD, that's fine. But I want to take this. I want to take my empowerment of scholars and families. I want to take it on a national level, so that you don't have to just have individual college-bound programs. Remember, dear Abby, dear Ann, I'd love to be dear Dr. Willis, right? Married to education with Dr. Willis, just so that we can reach people beyond Irvine, beyond California. Black folks are hurting everywhere. And others that want to fit in, that's fine. They're going to learn about Black history though. And that is the goal. So I thank you, Dr. Tribbett. And if you think of anything else, you let me know, whatever I can do to help. What are the next steps with this?